Try to unmute your mics when you don't speak. Okay, so we can start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Fearless Cities Summit. As you already know, the Fearless Cities event is an opportunity for the international municipalist movement, including activists, organizations, councillors, and mayors, to meet and exchange ideas and experiences. A key foundational element of Fearless Cities is implementation of radical ideas and tools to radicalize democracy and drive a transition to an economy that cares for the people and our environment. In the present session, we will be talking about the universal basic income, the ideas behind it, and how we can reinforce the municipalist agenda. But just for the people that maybe doesn't know what it is, let me talk about what can be the universal basic income. The universal basic income can be understood as an individual dividend from the Commonwealth, a citizen's right that compensates the losses related to privatizations that took over the commons, and it would serve as a material guarantee to effectively exercise the right for political participation. That would be a definition, that could be one. So in this session, we will question if the international municipalist movement can reclaim the universal basic income, and more specifically, which is the universal basic income that we need, no? Which type of universal basic income do we need? So to begin with this task, we have the pleasure to open a debate with Massimo De Angelis, Emeritus Professor at the University of East London, editor of The Commoner web journal, and a leading scholar on the commons and radical social change. After Massimo, we have a wonderful group of panelists that will reflect on Massimo's ideas and help us to better think how to bring together universal basic income and municipalism. We have Gabriela Cabaña, economic anthropologist from Chile, PhD student at London School of Economics and Political Science, and member of the Centro de Análisis Socioambiental and the Chilean network Ingreso Básico Universal, Universal Basic Income. We have Rodrigo Gil, social educator, coordinator of the Rights Office at Marea Atlántica, member of Red Renta Básica, the basic income network in Spain. And then we have Angelina Kuse, economic anthropologist as well from Poland, activist with Barcelona en Comú, predoctoral researcher at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and member of the Department of Anthropology, Philosophy, and Social Work at the Rovira i Virgili University. And finally, we have Julio Linares, economic anthropologist also. We have three economic anthropologists from Guatemala, and part of the social outreach for the Basic Income Earth Network. And he's also author of Fragments of an Ecology of Care, Basic Income Beyond the Nation State. Okay, so before giving the floor to Massimo, let me tell you that I will be paying close attention to the chat of the Zoom meeting. So please do not hesitate, any one of you that are watching us, to pose any question, doubt, or comment. So please, Massimo, the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Many thanks for this invitation, which encouraged me to bring together some of the thought on the link between universal basic income and in a perspective of the commons and radical change. So I'll take a broad perspective and then trying to zoom in on particulars of the importance of universal basic income within this perspective. And I want to start this brief intervention inviting you to reflect on what we can call, and hopefully will be clear later, our common context. That is from a general notion of social cooperation. What I mean with social cooperation, I mean very simply the set of all the activities, both nice and nasty to your taste, we can discuss about it, but the set of all the activity we collectively engage with in order to reproduce our bodies and lives, the existing institutions and system of our society, and the metabolic relation we have into the natural environment. So social cooperation is constituted by the whole of the different forms of organization, different ways to relate to one another and to govern these relations, as well as the different objectives and finalities that as a society as a whole we are engaging with. We're all in a way or another acting within this social cooperation, playing different roles and having differential access to the commonwealth that we collectively produce. And whether we work as unwaged workers in caring for others in our own families or micro communities, or as care workers in hospital, or we work as precarious or otherwise waged workers in circuits of capitalist valorization, or as a cultural workers in circuits of autonomous cultural valorization or the cultural industry, or if we work as a student, learning the skills and critical competences necessary to become actors in these productive circuits, we are all contributing to this process of social cooperation, generally understood. And I think this is important as a starting point to understand our lives implicated in the reproduction of this world in different ways. Now, I think it is useful to call this general social cooperation as our common context. That is, the common in the singular as understood as a context, a common condition in all its variety. And of course, we individually and in groups, we face differential ways to relate to this context, but as a whole, let's understand this as a common condition for the moment. And we collectively produce this common as a context in various ways by embracing or having to embrace, if we are forced to, a certain kind of rationality and forms of organizations that guide us to answer the 6 fundamental questions of any type of social production that we do. And these 6 fundamental questions are very simple. The how, the who, the what, the when, the why, and the how much to produce. Okay, these are questions that pop up all the time, and the different rationalities already have a plan. It's like an embedded algorithm to answer those questions. So since this common context is co-created by our multiple productive activities, situated in organizationally different productive circuits and interlinked scales, having different, often opposing finalities, objectives, whether we are aware of it or not. Now, if we think about it a bit more, this common as a context is the result of very different forms of governance at various levels and scales of space-time, occurring in very different organizational forms, and that provide often pre-programmed answers to those 6 fundamental questions of social production: the what, the how, the when, the how much, etc. As we govern, the way we collectively govern social cooperation is differentiated. One way is that we govern social cooperation through a set of sharp and marginalizing command hierarchies, as in the state and inside corporate structures in which we are relating to. We participate in our roles within those, and we engage with those. Or another form of ways to govern this social cooperation is through competitive patterns of interaction, whereby someone wins and someone loses. And this, of course, turns life reproduction into a continuous rat race, as well as it promotes the most blatant and destructive forms of extractivism. That's competition, right, of modern capitalist system. But we also govern social cooperation through horizontal and inclusive form of co-production and self-governance, the commons, where the hierarchy of command is at most the object of satire and struggle. And competition is the domain of some convivial game where no one loses the rights of means of life if they lose the game. So we do compete, like, among ourselves when we play, but competition doesn't structure our life, our means of survival. So this is the commons. But in one way or in another, through our activity, we participate in all these forms of governance. We participate in ways that often are endured, like competition and hierarchy, or actively and freely created, like in the commons. So our common, as the context of our doing, is the set of all these different contradictory ways of relating to each other, in which we produce stuff, we produce social relations, and we reproduce the society we live in. And here is the important point, I think. If there are the problems that there are in the world, and I let you think about the chronic crisis of our time that you prefer, from the deep social inequalities to environmental distractions and anything in between. So if there are these issues, it's because within this common as a context, there is too much hegemony of forms of governance that separate people and the environment from one another, like competition, and verticalize the hierarchy of command. So there is, and we can argue this, I don't have the time, but we can have an argument in terms of complexity, in terms of all sorts of discourses in which we can argue this, but that's the point. The point is that there is the need to grow the commons in order to deal with all those crises. There is the need to valorize the horizontal and inclusive forms of co-production and self-governance at all scales of society. And there is the need to find ways to articulate them and scale them up, so as the freedom of the parts become the condition of new forms of social coordination and social cooperation, to establish new way of living in environmentally and socially just ways in our cities, our territories, and our planet. That's the point, is that addressing the governance of the commons as our conditions requires that the common is not only seen as a condition, it cannot be exhausted as a condition, but it must also be a project that is constitute a new context of social cooperation, a new ways to relate and to produce in this society. That's the very basic things of of the crux of the matter in terms of social transformation. Now, in this common as a project, the role of the universal basic income is crucial. And this at least for three reasons. First, because the universal basic income recognizes that much work that is done and that is important for the reproduction of the common context is unwaged, that is unvalued in the dominant form of valuation of our society, and which is money. So from the work of care in the house to the sparks of mutual aid and solidarity during crisis periods, like it happens in the financial crisis of 2007 in Greece and many other parts of the world, or the current COVID crisis. We had a boom of mutual aid activities all across the world. All this is unwaged labor, wage labor which is not recognized in mainstream values, or the creative work of cognitive labor. Second, the second reason why the universal basic income is crucial for the perspective of expanding the commons is because it's the universal character of the universal basic income may help us to keep at bay divisive exclusion that the hegemonic system of capitalist accumulation always seek to recreate. Universal means an income which is not conditional, that is not turned into an instrument of workfare, for example, like they've done in Italy with the citizen income, or exclusion of non-citizen, but people who contribute within a particular area to the wealth and to the commonwealth. So this non-exclusion embedded in the universal character is a key principle of the common as a project. And third, because it is a basic income in the sense that it provides a floor, a minimum guarantee access to the means of reproduction, to the means of existence, to the means of life. How much that floor is, it's of course a matter of political negotiation and agonism and antagonism. Okay? And I leave it open. But for us, this floor is important, not just because in our idea, what is basic must allow people to live with dignity, no matter what is their access to the wage through work. But also because it potentially opens the space for two interlinked transformative rules. The first is that the universal basic income would increase people bargaining power vis-a-vis capital. And this has been discussed often. Increasing people bargaining power to overcome poor conditions of wage and work by reducing their dependency on the capitalist markets and increasing their power to refuse over-exploitative work. Second, as a result of a reduction in the compulsion of working in the capitalist market to make a living, it does liberate people time and mental space, offering them the opportunity to redirect their creative energies, to engage with others through transformative commons. People have time to engage with others, more time to engage with others, and peace of mind, okay? In this sense, an appropriate universal basic income would incentivize the expansion of the commons, as well as open spaces for active participation in the governance of key institutions of social reproduction, as well as political practice. And I want to conclude with just mentioning a couple of risks. And, we are demanding universal basic income inside a society which is hegemonized by those forms of social organization, which is competition and hierarchies, which won't stay still, even if we were to put on the ground a massive movement and being able to succeed. I just want to list two of these risks. The first risk has to do with the fact that universal basic income would be paid in money, and money can be inflated. Now, that means that at whatever level universal basic income is obtained after a season of strong campaigning, this level can in time be devalued with inflation. If you assume the that that the universal basic income stay constant or grow less than prices, you can purchase less means of subsistence than before if there is inflation. So it's like having a real reduction of that basic income. It should be a warning, the fact that while here we are talking about universal basic income, many on the financial press right now are talking about a commodity super cycle, an increase in the price of basic commodities and food due to both neoliberal Green Deals, which puts emphasis on technological change rather than mode of production change, and climate change. Both the way that the establishment want to deal with climate change and climate change are putting double pressures on prices. The Green Deal does put strong pressure on commodity prices that enters in the production of batteries and solar and renewable technologies to increase, while climate change by increasing temperatures makes much harder to produce foodstuff, which consequences in the global market. So here is what we are facing at the moment. The increase in prices is already with us and most likely will increase, will accelerate. So to counter this, we need to keep focus on indexation mechanism linked to universal basic income. But this requires constant vigilance and mobilization, and constant mobilization. And the common project requires alerted and mobilized social movements by necessities. The second risk has to do with part of the common sense in our society that regards many of those who would receive income from the collectivity, that we regard them as so-called scroungers or free riders, because their lifestyles or moment in life doesn't put them in position to give anything back to the collectivities. Okay, this would make all the rest of us as suckers, as the debate goes. This is the idea of free riding, which is a problem much discussed in the commons literature. But I think this argument can be resolved only through increased mobilization by commons for projects and forms of diffuse governance that are relevant to the lives of the participating commoners. Okay, so it's a question of changing through the commons also the subjectivities and the way we perceive the give and take of society. Okay, so I would leave it like that. I hope I haven't spent more than 10 minutes. So if
Massimo, it was great. I think you give us a splendid way to start the debate with the panelists, and we thank you very much for putting all these thoughts together and giving us this framework very clearly. And I think you have touched on issues that each panelist has worked in its own way. So we're going to go into detail now. So I think you had to leave. So
I leave. I wait. I stay until.
Okay.
The game is still.
Good. Good. Perfect. But okay, perfect. That's good. But then now we move to our panelists. Okay, so Massimo, if you want to participate at the end of the intervention of each panelist, you can intervene. So in this now we move to our panelists, and in this first round, we asked them to try to link municipalism and universal basic income. How are they related? So to start with this task, I will give the floor to Angelina. And later I will give it to Rodri, and later to Gabriela, and finally to Julio. Okay, so you can try to be 4 minutes so we can have more discussion. 4 or 5 minutes, Gabriela, and then we can debate later. Angelina, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Massimo, for your opening. Basically, when Massimo started to talk about the commons as a project, mentioning workfare, free riders, and this kind of concepts, he already said the most of the things I wanted to say. But okay, I will first I will sum up or complement a bit what was already said, because basically I think the same. I think that municipalism, not as a short-term strategy, but as that more radical horizon, as the project, is the only such a comprehensive and all-encompassing project right now that we have on the table. Like the global municipalist movement is the most radical one, the most progressive one. But so we have this radical horizon and organized people. And this is something that the universal basic income, just as an idea and a proposal, doesn't have, because it doesn't have like a concrete political horizon. But the municipalism doesn't have the political strategy how to progress towards this utopia, let's say. Of course, saying utopia, I don't want to say something that is not possible, but I mean something that is radically different. So in this sense, they are like complementary. We have the strategy and we have the tool, because we can observe our own municipalist movements and their class composition. Do we really see like the popular class within our movements? And how can we see these people in a wage work world, and how we can actually engage them in politics when, and especially now in the context of the pandemic, they are engaged mostly in their basic social reproductive issues. And if not basic reproductive issues, then status maintainment and stuff like that. Because what Massimo said, the workfare system, the system that in which the central subjectivity is based on the link with wage work, is so strong. It's like the base of the society. And actually, like the capitalism uses wage work not only to accumulate the capital and create social inequalities, but to control people through the wage work. Time, we have only 24 hours a day. If we have to engage in wage work and we have precarious salaries, then we just cannot be involved in the politics. So I would ask actually, I would ask myself and all the municipalist people, how what's our plan actually to create this massive political engagement, and not only of the lower or medium social class, but a popular class. And we need something like the basic universal basic income, something that would allow to reject waged work. And this is also related with the with creating of new forms of self-government, of course, because one of the worst from my radically democratical point of view, think of the current system is not as only what the old left thought of, that the capital steals part of what the worker produces. But the worst thing is that people are workers and not actors of politics, and they cannot collectively decide about what is produced, how it is produced, what is done actually, how we organize, how we distribute that, and so on. So in order to guarantee our individual reproduction, we have to actually sometimes be engaged in activities that are bad for the planet, bad for us, bad for the community, and we have no political voice to challenge that. And for now, I will finish. I will finish here. Oh no, I wanted to also continue this line on free riders. Also, this is a very dangerous thing. I mean, if we have such a strong welfare system we have right now, we cannot also build, we cannot even focus on the most important things, because we are feeding the far-right discourses of hate and so on, because this glorification of work we have right now makes that we are creating these divisions of people who contribute, as Massimo said, and who are the free riders. And this is like an axis, a central axis of the political debate instead of more important issues.
Perfect, Angelina. Thank you. So now, Rodri.
Well, hi everyone, and thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And well, I am very happy to be here because I'm listening to all these speeches, and well, it's something that we really need to talk about, and we are not doing it, I think, in all our spaces, and we should. Maybe because we are trying to put the basic income idea in our movements, and I think now we are getting stronger inside of them. But well, this is it's not a new idea, but it's a new idea for so many people in the municipalism. So well, I think we all want the best for our community, for our communities. And because that's what basic income is all about, redistributing wealth for everyone in our community. And for me, the key point is this phrase is local matters, because as a municipalist and basic income advocates, we know what matters to the people of our community, because we are part of it, or we should. And that's what are we doing? Well, doing politics every day in the street, and taking care of what the people thinks and needs. No? And that's why it's so important to the municipalist movement in order to take care of the people's needs. So the economic crisis and the structural changes in the economy in the recent years, and especially now from the start of the pandemic, we have led to the persistence of population groups at risk of poverty and social exclusion, as well as the emergence of new and less traditional profiles, as in the case of poor workers, the precariat. So these changes carry the danger of turning a transitional circumstance due to insufficient income of economic poverty into a structural problem of social exclusion. So we really need to focus on this. And while economic developments or supposed economic developments are intensifying and extending, and even in many cases making chronic situation of social risk, public policies have not achieved any of its goals, like fighting poverty or creating a more equal society. So that's where municipalism should take a place, and basic income is a fundamental tool for doing that. The basic income has an emancipatory character. It's giving control to citizens to decide on what is public and what is private, and decide over their lives. It's the same fundamentals of municipalism, giving the power to the people, make them take action on what they want for their lives. So, well, in Marea Atlántica, we are committed to the idea of basic income. So in 2018, the Basic Income Collective of A Coruña, collective of which I am part, asked Marea Atlántica and the rest of the Coruña Town Council parties to support the motion that we wrote about basic income based on a Council of Europe resolution. So well, that's part of what we can do to link basic income and municipalism. We submitted this resolution or motion, and it's been approved in October 18 in the plenary session of A Coruña Town Council, and all the political groups approved this resolution, even the right-wing ones, not because they really believed in this idea, but we put this idea in the agenda, and that's the important thing. So, well, I truly believe that this link between basic income and municipalism is unbreakable, because we have so many things in common. So the thing is how long it's going to take to us to make it a real policy and a real thing in our everyday work. So, well, I think that's it by the moment.
Thank you, Rodri. Yes, it's so nice. Maybe later you can explain maybe the specifics also of what you have been thought in your municipalist platform in this basic income. Now, Gabriela, please.
Thank you, David. I'm also very glad to be here and having this very interesting and necessary conversation that I also feel we are only starting to explore very early in the debate. And I actually wanted to share a bit more of a political, two political insights I've been thinking about in preparation for this panel, and I think they connect nicely with what the previous panelists have said. And I was thinking about what we have learned in the Chilean Basic Income Network. So as David was saying, I'm part of this group. We have been working together for a bit more than a year. And in that period, it's been amazing how many proposals that are not really universal basic incomes have been using this label of the universal. And I think they reveal something very interesting about how do we think about the recipients of handouts or benefits of the state, and more widely, how we think about policy. So, universal can mean anything. It usually ends up being, extremely poor households, maybe women with children, and, it's a conditional help that is only during the emergency period, like the coronavirus crisis right now. And I think it really reveals how we think the public in our neoliberal order that we have, at least here in Chile, and I think it's quite widespread, and how universal basic income, like when we have to define it over and over again as being universal and unconditional, it can really help us widen our political imagination and think beyond this incrementalist reform, right? Because when we think about increasing some subsidies here and there, we're not really breaking the mold that creates all these inequalities in the reproduction of our life in common, as Massimo was saying. So I was thinking, what are the barriers that we have faced to actually implement a basic income? And I think the arguments to not implement it are very similar to this idea of keeping municipalism at bay. So I see a lot of an opposition between more radical initiatives being led by municipalist governments around the world, and also this reaction to actually move forward and do a real universal basic income. And I think the interesting thing they share is that both actually use existing policy frameworks. So, they put one foot on the structures, but with the other one, they're actually kicking the system in the face. So, the system can sense this, and that's why it rejects, in particular, I think the state rejects this kind of projects. And I was thinking that I actually fear, even though I am a basic income advocate and activist, I fear that by definition, the state might never dare to implement a real universal basic income. I think it might be too radical, and I think somewhere in their hearts, politicians involved in the administration of the state know that it might open the door for its own dissolution, right? Because, you know, we start having all these conversations about the nature of money. Why do we force people to work so they can make a living? And, you know, you end up having these very meaningful conversations that rely on you not having those conversations, right? Not realizing that you have this incredibly oppressive system ruling your life. So I really see, like, you know, maybe municipalism, without reaching the state, we can start implementing and making this project a reality. You know, in a way, changing the world without taking that power of the state, but maybe like smaller levels or more local levels of power. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there for this round of interventions.
Okay, then I will leave you more time afterwards because you were very good with the time. Okay, Julio, your turn.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for being here, especially Massimo for your intervention. I very much am inspired by your work. I'm really thankful for this moment, and I agree totally with Gabi that the state, well, it's basically a condition. No, if we're talking about unconditional basic income, this is a question that we have to tackle. And for me, municipalism, what I understand it as is as direct democratic governance. Whether if it's the democratic autonomy in Rojava or the Zapatista autonomous municipalities in Chiapas or the indigenous communal governments in Totonicapán, in that places known as Guatemala, you know, there is no one model for radical democracy, but they're all based on the notion of having an assembly where decisions can be made about the things that matter in life, and with the working groups that make it happen and so on and so forth to take care of the forest, the funeral, the party, the water, the commerce, and yes, also money. So, you know, most of these communal governments are all based on the principle of common ownership of land and shared labor, which, as Massimo said, is often unpaid and serves for the reproductive circuit that maintains the commons. And in Guatemala, where I am from, communitarian feminists speak of labor and land not as commodities for sale, but as territories of defense. So the territorio cuerpo and the territorio tierra, so the body territory and the land territory. And there is, of course, however, a missing link to truly unleash, I believe, the power of the commons and start enclosing and destroying capitalism once and for all. And this can be done through what we call, with Gabi, the commodification of money, or in other words, it's the decommodification. So the three famous fictitious commodities that Polanyi once outlined of land, labor, and money could begin to become decommodified via a universal basic income that is issued by people. Because in Rojava, in Chiapas, or in the communal governments that I talked about, all people use the money of the state in order to live. Whether we like it or not, we are locked in. We reproduce the state capital nexus in practice every time we use state money to pay. You know, these are the promises of the state. Money is a promise. And we need to create promises that are common, and not private banks, not the state money, but really a common money, a currency for the commons, currencies for the commons. And we would like to argue that to create radical change, we must make money a commons. And this means at the same time, transforming the institutions by which we co-produce life, democratizing them. The commodification of money can come about via an unconditional basic income issued by people and for people on a municipalist and internationalist basis. So by claiming the power to issue money as a basic income, communities can collectively decommodify both their labor and their money and show money for what it really is, a social relation, an agreement, a debt between people. And yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Julio. You're all keeping very good to time, so thank you very much. And good. So I think now we can agree that we have set a common, let's say, more theoretical frame. And now let's try to go to more details on how do we imagine this universal basic income working. Okay. So for this second round, well, first of all, Massimo, do you want to reflect on something that has been said very shortly on before going back to more the details on how to implement the universal basic income? You're muted.
Yeah, there are many themes that popped up, and it could all be basic for further reflection. I remain curious, for example, on more specifics of that you mentioned, in fact, David, of the municipalist agenda in relation to UBI that Rodri mentioned. The question that Angelina mentioned of what's our plan to create massive political engagement is the $1 million question. I mean, of course, massive political engagement is differentiated in different contexts, and of course, there are common themes, but there are also different conditions. So it's a big question. Something that Gabriela mentioned, that the state may never implement a real UBI because it may open to its own dissolution. And I would say not just the state, because if the hypothesis goes in the right direction, that if you introduce an UBI unconditional and basic at a level which is proper, and incentivate and give further life to project of the commons, which can also be like Julio was mentioning, addressed toward decommodify that wealth, land, but money itself. I mean, UBI can be, I mean, the money we get from the state can be pooled together in different ways to fund different projects, okay? Together with other ways. The energy we get out of liberating ourselves from the compulsion to work and to work for extremely low wages, precarious conditions. It generates resources, energies to advance what you call the municipalist project. We can call it different ways, but you know, it's essentially a process of radical emancipation. And so precisely because of that, the state may never implemented the real UBI, a real UBI unconditioned. I think it's a chicken and egg problem in a sense, I would say. What comes first? Strong social movements within which subjectivities have changed to the point that question what exists, or we need tools like UBIs in order to increase radical mobilization and dedication of radical energies to new projects. I think is an ongoing process of interaction, so it depends on the different situation. But the fact that the state may never implement a real UBI is a possibility. So what do we do? Why not? Because you know it goes against the grain, the inner logic of work, of the imposition of work for work's sake, that this system does it. The ideology of scroungers and free riders is so important to maintain distinctions, lines of exclusions between the multitude, the commoners. Okay. When we don't see, in fact, that we are in different phases in life, and we are in different moments in time and different situation contexts, and that we all aspire to somehow to contribute to our existence and the existence of the network we are engaged with, but we are in different situations. So these are big issues that that will have to be dealt with as we go along. There is no silver bullet, I think.
Good. I think then we can move to these details of the universal basic income in order to know, to unpack this fundamental, let's say, conflicts, and to understand better what comes first, no, or the egg or the chicken, or yeah. So I think here we go to the details. Let's say, how should the universal basic income be implemented at the local level? Do we have any interesting experiences already? What are the political barriers to that? And Gabriela has already mentioned one. And how the universal basic income should be complemented, maybe with some community activities, some idea of the commons, just money maybe it's not enough. Here I'm going to start with Rodri, because he's participated in a platform where they have implemented a basic income in Municipalism. He mentioned it, and I think it's interesting. So he can tell us a little bit what they have learned of this experience, and then later I move to the other speakers. Rodri, I give you like 4 minutes, 5 minutes on this issue.
Okay. Well, I have to say it's not a basic income, it's a conditional benefit, but well, let's say it's a step forward compared to the conditional benefits like the regional ones here in Spain. So in 2016, when we were in office here in Coruña, we created the municipal social income. And well, of course, it's a step forward because of how it's been created and all the details, but it still has the conditional grants problems, let's say. And the goal was to take care of the people who lost the right or never had it to apply to the regional subsidies, because here in Spain, decentralized state, every region has this right to give the subsidies. So, well, the requirements are more or less simple: have reached the age of 18 and not have the minimum age to apply to a non-contributory contributory retirement pension, having no relatives with the possibility of providing help. That's something that I don't like, but we had to do it. I'll tell you why. Be registered and reside in the city of Coruña, at least for 6 months, and not be entitled to receive the regional social inclusion income or any other similar benefits. Well, the municipal social income was an icebreaker because it allowed undocumented migrants to apply. And also it meant a safety net for those who lost the right to receive the regional benefit. The amounts are even more than the regional benefits, but let's say it's a conditional benefit. I wish that we could do that in Coruña. We tried. I mean, we wanted to keep improving it, making it unconditional, or at least less restrictive. But well, then we lost the election, so now we are not in the government. So actually the new government, well, since 2019, they are trying to make this benefit die because they are not funding it. They are changing the team who is making this benefit work. So yeah, we found some things that are very interesting, especially related to how people is feeling safe in this city because of this benefit, because they know if they don't have the right to get a regional or even a state benefit like ingreso mínimo vital here in Spain, they know that they can make a living. They can, well, at least survive. For me, it's not enough, because I think we really need to provide a good life to the people, and they shouldn't depend on who's in office and who's well managing all these benefits. But well, for us, it was a new thing because we never developed something like that, and we found that the state, because well, every council has the interventor and the secretary, and they are like the cops who are going to well, see if you are doing things okay or not. So we have to fight against these guys, and well, for me it was a good thing. Even I am a basic income advocate, so I will never like a conditional benefit, but because so many people had hope with this benefit, and it never happened, or at least in the years I've been living here and working with people in need, I never seen people very happy to have a social benefit, and this created this kind of hope. So well, my thought is, what if we had a basic income? And the hope would be massive. So, well, I don't want to waste too much time. So, well, you can ask me if I am losing some information that I'm sure. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rodri. Now, Julio, please.
Yes, thank you, Rodri, for sharing your experience. As far as I know, I'm aware of 3 living local municipal basic income systems to date. So the one in South Korea in the region of Gyeonggi, the governor there has issued a basic income to about 170,000 people, age 24, and it's going quite well. I mean, what it does is that it's a really good strategy to do in a local currency, because then you start to regionalize the social relations of production, exchange, consumption, distribution, etc., etc. So businesses start to accept it, and they can, you know, like in the case of, for example, in Brazil, the city of Marica has also issued a basic income to its citizens, to about 42,000 of them, and there the businesses start to trade it between them. So there is an element of complementarity emerging between different agents, different people in the value chains that are in an economy, right? So in a place like Europe, where global supply chain capitalism has made you know, local producers very fragile to global markets. For example, a farmer produces for the global market in Europe mostly. Having a basic income in a local currency would revitalize the economy that is now dying. I mean, in Germany, this is a taboo, but farmers in Germany commit suicide two farmers a day on average. And these are statistics that are not known by the governments themselves, because you're not supposed to talk about this stuff. There is one in Spain actually called Demos, I believe, is done in the Canary Islands. I don't know much about the details of this currency, but I know it's about 1,000 people that receive it, but it's also done on a local level. So I think a local currency that is really embedding in the social relations there could actually create a universe of value, so to say, where people can claim their unconditionality, regain power, have the freedom to say no to employers, you know, etc., etc. So I think definitely that's a good strategy, but I think it has to be embedded in a broader political project of not just the local currency here and there, but actually in this, I would like to bring about the paradigm of democratic confederalism proposed by Öcalan and the Kurdish freedom movement, as a way to inspire us to think about a democratic money system, a money fabric that is issued by people in democratic assembly and confederated across different regions around the world. So in this way, the municipalist internationalist movement, you know, where people's assemblies, women's assemblies can have the power to decide over their own monetary mass, which is now a monopoly of central bankers in the ECB in Frankfurt. money that is issued by people as a democratic and unconditional basic income, this would be, not only universal, but rather I would argue a pluriversal basic income that can flourish from our current dominant social form, the nation states that we're on. So I think what's interesting about democratic confederalism is that it combines this notion of localism with self-sustainability, the decentralization also of power, and the idea of a confederation where this power actually remains in the local levels. And to address the concern that Massimo spoke of about the inflationary aspect of a basic income, I think it's important to think about the design of the money that we use for a basic income. There are many proposals out there. One that I like a lot is one where the money that is created also rots over time. So instead of the debt money system that we have today, whereby the debt is made with an interest on it, with a positive interest on it that you have to repay back, this unconditional income could be either issued at no interest, or even better, I would argue, with a decay rate on it. So then every month you get it no matter what, it's unconditional, and you spend it into being, and if you don't use it, it just rots like a potato would rot. So that would be one way of addressing this issue, but there are other ways. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Julio. And now I have Gabriela, please.
Thank you, David. I'm gonna take it from what Julio just said. Well, because we have worked and thought through these things together, so I very much agree with his approaches and diagnosis. And I'm going to do a bit of a thought experiment, because I haven't been myself directly involved in a pilot or in an experience like what Rodri just said. But I have been doing research now in a territory here in Chile very marked by colonial relations, by extractivism, by ecological destruction, and it's now kind of trapped in a dependency of very destructive industries. And I try to think of basic income as a way of having a brighter future, a better future for that place. So that place is an archipelago, it's a group of islands in the south of Chile. It's called Chiloé, that has been extremely affected by very destructive industries like salmon farming and deforestation and extraction of a kind of moss that is also exported overseas. So, when I think about universal basic income as a way of making money circulate in a different way, and therefore making value circulate in a different way, I really think it's important to connect UBI to localized, territorialized social projects of reproducing a life in common that comes from a shared history. In this case of Chiloé, this insular life, moving between the different islands, that has a history of a particular livelihood, of ways of being together, of cooperation, ways that have been lost. And so today what we see is that the way money circulates in that place is like a huge vacuum cleaner that just extracts and takes all the value that generates through the use of living beings and living ecosystems out of that island, sometimes even out of Chile, and just leaves like a few crumbles of cash back to the people that live there. And we call this progress, and the bad thing is that it leaves very deep scars and creates dependency. So what if we could rather create a universal basic income that would circulate in a local coin that would be only for that territory, that could support and promote other forms of livelihood, that could make people the space and the security to work on their own fields, for instance, and not work in the salmon farming that is extremely bad. So we could recover ways of doing things that have been completely displaced, and also open the possibilities for alternative political futures. So for me, at least, it's very important not to repeat these like blanket statements that a universal or monolithic money is going to be good for all different territories. I think we need to really see what are the communities that we want, what are the commons, like the relatively enclosed commons that then can confederate, as Julio was saying, and how the currencies that we use must be adapted and understood in those ecosystems in the wide sense of it. So I think that is it's a very, very interesting way of putting basic income at the service of autonomy, at the service of the constitution of these territories that have been so intervened, and that if they don't have something like a UBI, it's extremely hard to break the patterns that capitalism has imposed. So yeah, I think that would be my 2 cents on how it could go from there.
Perfect. Now, Angelina, please.
I mostly agree with everything what was said. I will add just a few remarks. As Julio said, I think that it's really important not just to implement some local currency, but it must be linked to some broader project and ecosystem of cooperatives, social economy, enterprises, and values and projects and assemblies and so on. And as Gabby said, like municipalism is a project that I really like also, because as an anthropologist, of course, I do not like this imperial colonial projects that want to say this is the new way how you should do the things, and we will apply it in every place without taking into account the local culture, the local conditions, and so on. So I think it would be really important to give the people the space to decide about what is the basic asset in their case. And also I wanted to share some experience. A few years ago, I was involved in the design of a local currency in Valencia in Spain, although I didn't follow up on that project, so I don't know how it happened. But I remember why it was crucial to design it and to implement it in one of the poor districts, because when people were receiving some social benefit, then they were going to the Carrefour, for example, the supermarket. So it was like an very easy way to extract what was coming from the municipality to the global capitalist market very easily, like extract the resources that are there. So if we have like a common, like an ecosystem that is that aims to be able somehow reproduce itself, like they are doing it also within the grassroots movement in Greece after 2008. And then we are able to avoid this situation that they do not extract all this the commonly created value. So in this sense, this more territorialized, localized idea of the basic income has also there is additional value of that, and I'm personally amazed by this idea that actually Julio brought in some debate a few months ago, because until that in Spain the debate about the universal basic income was only focused on the national level, on all this, of course, Republican ideas that are behind, but without all this municipalist and background and this plan to give more competences and do more life on the local level.
The cat, so funny. She wanted to join all the meeting. So I think for now the plan of the interventions is we have finished. I don't see. I see a comment on the chat for Gabriela. If you want to check it out while if you want to respond to it, but. You made me reflect with Angelina was talking about the Valencia project or something. In Barcelona, there was a pilot and there were some results. And I think also the municipalist and maybe the academia or whatever needs to check how results are analyzed of these pilots, because there was two groups that had to analyze. One had to analyze the free riders, how the people related with jobs and work after receiving the income. Another group analyzed how the people participated in the community with the income. And the first group said, okay, look, we are seeing people that are not working anymore. And the other group found that some of the people that was not working anymore was because they have a back problem and they couldn't work anymore. They just wanted to spend time with their family. So in one figure was telling me this is a free rider problem, but another figure was telling me this is just giving some common sense to these people. This person has 56 years old. He has a back problem, and we are inserting him in the care economy or in caring, in commons or whatever. Let's say. So yeah, it's important how to be very critical on how do we analyze all these pilots that Julio was mentioning. Okay, so reaching at this point, any one of you wants to have some further comments, wants to has something lost in the debate, or wants to comment, or Massimo, do you want to go back to something that has been said?
I have a question to the panel, since one of these topics has come out. That is how you see the link between universal basic income as a national frame, because when we're talking about UBI, we generally talk about a particular demand to the state to issue a universal basic income in the monetary currency of that state, whatever that is. How do you see the link between this and these more municipal or localized projects of universal basic income scaled at the localized projects as a localized currencies? That is essentially currencies issued by local governments or local assemblies, or so how do we have a way to conceive the relation between these two? I mean, are these two opposite things, either one or the other, or are part of the same struggles, campaign? Or that's what I'm asking.
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think we have to struggle at all levels. So within the state, the people had fight for a basic income at a national level is there. But I think now what became clear now, even with the COVID pandemic, is that it is really hard to demand the state to issue an unconditional amount of money for all the people in the place. And so what we started doing is to say, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just do a basic income? And so
how do you do it? Sorry, because can you elaborate on how you do it and who does it? It's where it is. Tell us about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, to name some examples, to go back to the pilot that I mentioned, for example, in the city of Maricá, it was the local mayor that decided to do it. Now,
Okay.
Maricá is called the city of utopias. Now, there are many social policies going on, a lot of things about cooperativism there, and they decided to issue this Mumbuka currency, which was an outcome of the high revenues that the city had in relationship to oil. So they have an oil port and they have a bunch of revenues that come from there. And then their idea of money was to say, okay, let's have these revenues there in the real and then issue the currency, the Mumbuka, to people as a, as a local digital currency, right?
So sorry to I just want to, so that means that the money issued by the municipality somehow is backed by it, is hard money, which must be international money because it's the result
of oil. Yeah. So that's one experience, one live experience now. And then on the Korean side, the governor there issued this local currency to people that are 24 years old. And then the logic works in a way where the people that spend it, then the business is accepted and the businesses can then claim the won in return, right? So there is this hybridity between the local currency and the state, right? But that I think is related to a debate that is really present now in the US and everywhere else about the monetary theory, the modern monetary theory, about where money comes from, how is it issued, and so on. And I think in these, what is interesting, and it's something that really hasn't happened in reality at full scale yet, is that a municipal government could have the same powers as the state to issue money and to take it away, so to destroy it, so to say. There is no reason why it shouldn't. It's a very simple mechanism. It's not rocket science. It's just issuing the money and then taxing it away, or making it rot, or whatever other mechanism. But I think as a beginning assumption, that is way more powerful than relying on oil revenues or other existing extractivist industries, right? So I think it's also about challenging the monetary institutions. If you really are serious about creating other social forms, right? That will have, of course, interactions with the state in one way or the other, but I think really claiming that power at an institutional level, locally and federated, is one way to, at least I think, to bring about some sort of real life basic income that is not, that can exist in the now, in the long present.
Rodri, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, I think funding UBI is a state level issue, but we should promote basic income pilots like Beam Income in Barcelona and other pilots, because that really helps to show people that we can make different policies, new policies based on cash transfers. But well, I know about Spain. I don't know about the rest of the country, so I speak about what I barely know. So in Spain, the municipalities they have so many limits in order to do almost anything because of how the system has been created. And basic income is easier at a local level. The implementation, it's easier at a local level because the establishment is not going to say, no, we're against this, because they don't care, because they are not going to touch their pockets. They are not going to take any money from them. But if we do it at a national level, well, it's a big redistribution of wealth. And that's a very important thing, because for me as a social educator, making community is something very important, and creating a local UBI is going to make community. But as a progressist person, I think that redistribution of wealth is important as well, because I really think that we need to take the money from those who are not paying any taxes and stealing the common goods because they are not paying any taxes. So we are losing so many things in the way. So I think we should do or try to do both, like fighting for a national universal basic income, because we need to redistribute the wealth. And if meanwhile we are not able to do that, it's good that we test or we implement a basic income in a local level, because everything that Julio and Gabriela and Angelina said, because well, we really need to make the communities work and well, take all the flavor from it.
I think there is a question, Angelina. I'm going to give it, but there was a question from the audience. If you want to touch on this issue, but I think it's related, the question in the audience, because they're asking, what about migration? No, it's an issue that sometimes comes, no, about this calling effect, and I remember with Angelina participated in a panel with Lluís Torrents, and Lluís Torrents from Barcelona, he's an advocate for universal basic income. He was talking about making a global basic income in order to avoid these problems of migration and all that, and to give, but I think maybe that was disconnected with Rory was saying about this maybe two scales of working with universal basic income. But well, if someone wants to answer this issue of migration, and Angelina, I give it to you now.
I wanted to comment on the previous thing that I agree with Rodri, that we need to work in that dialectical way, like taking into account the temporalities and materialities of our action. Because first, to reclaim basic income from the state is also just a matter of social justice, because the story of the commons is the different story of the classical economy. It's not like there was nothing and then we work, we produce, and you should be grateful to us that you have these sources. But the story is the opposite one, that there was the common good of everyone. And then the privatization is to steal that common good. So to redistribute this wealth that is built on the appropriation is just a matter of social justice, first of all. So, but from the other point of view, how we do that, we are like somehow locked, enslaved, and we don't even have the possibility to own our own time. So municipalism in this sense is also super interesting, because it works with this dual power logics between people who run in the local elections and occupy the places of relative power, of course, because it's not a power, because the state has more power, or the international financial institutions even more probably. But it has like the movement can have a little bit of power within some institutions in the current institutional order, let's say. So thanks to this cooperation based on dual power between the local social movements and the municipality, the city hall, you can build something like local currency. I mean, I'm not an expert in money, but as Julio said, money is a promise, like a basic promise. So if they have a blockchain, if they have things like that, I'm sure we can build it in cooperation with municipality. The question would be to make this local ecosystem, to make it relatively self-sufficient. I mean, the basic things people should be able to achieve within this small ecosystem. So having that, you can keep fighting. You have more like leverage power. You have more possibilities, material possibilities to also reclaim to the state, not only the basic income redistribution and so on, but another competences, because the ultimate horizon is to like steal or take over these competences, of course. So I think it's very dialectical, and this is how we should think about it in a strategical way, how you do the next step.
Nice, thank you, Angelina. Gabriela, do you want to add something?
Yes, maybe I want to add just a couple of comments on the question of migration, because I think this again reveals some assumptions about the role of people that migrate from one place to the other. So I think this fear, it goes together with, the fear of, oh, if you give money to people, they're going to be lazy, they're going to be watching TV all day. And, like this moral panic of what's going to happen with our society as we know it, like the panic of disintegration. I think it's a very, like a caricature to think that, you're going to have lots of people crossing the borders if you have a UBI. if you have people crossing the borders, it's because, you know, there is an existential threat and we call them refugees and we welcome them. You know, like that's like number one thing. The other thing, I mean, and the technical answer to that is there are some, like you can have some mechanisms. So, you know, you can ask for people to live in a place for say 3 years. So, you know, they have like a residence permit and you make it a benefit for residents in a place, you know, which seems natural. People who live there, regardless of the passport you have, if you live in a place and you contribute to life in that place, you get your UBI. So I think that's very reasonable. And if people migrate and integrate in a society, and they will most likely be contributing to the reproduction, being possibly underpaid, I would say I will be happy to give them a UBI and strengthen that political community. So just that comment.
Good. Now we are arriving to the end. I would like to add something from a reading I made with Angelina from De Angelis. You mentioned that in the creation of commons, one has to think that one has to make pacts with capital sometimes, because capital still provides most of the means of existence, and you cannot just create another model just from, or another system. You have to make these pacts, no? And I think universal basic income is going to be with ourselves sooner or later, because even from Silicon Valley, from the capitalists, they're thinking of how we're going to maintain some social calm. And I think the debate now that I think we have framed many ways in which type of universal basic income are we going to have a pact with capital in some moments in order to have what we want, no? And here I think we have the debate, we have opened the debate for many issues on how we want this universal basic income that sooner or later is going to be here. And we're going to have to decide which type of arrangements we have with capital in the time being, as is that hegemonic system, as Massimo said, no? So I think the questions of the state and the municipality that Rodri and Julio were discussing is also important, no? Who does the redistribution, no? Because having, in the current system, we cannot just give the power to powerful municipalities that have the resources to have basic income, and other poorer municipalities to just don't have resources. We need a state that redistributes. So these questions, I think, is very good for thinking the municipal strategy and universal basic income. Well, it's almost 9. Thank you very much to all. I think it was very good debate. And all this meeting, all this session is going to be in YouTube, so we can recover it. I think you said many things, very interesting things. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, so just take there is many more sessions going on in the Fearless City Summit, and there are going to be sessions until Friday. So please just join some of them during the following days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Take care. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Enjoy the game. Ciao.
Ciao.